Greetings, Theories of Abstraction students. I hope this finds you well. Welcome to week number 5, and we are going to devote this week to Picasso and the role that structure and form plays in the development of abstraction. There are a few things I want to bring to your attention and to reiterate. First of all, abstraction, perhaps as you are thinking about abstraction, as we're working through this, you're thinking about Pollock, or you're thinking about Malevich, you're thinking about Barnett Newman or Mark Rothko. But abstraction begins with the Impressionists. It's a direction. It's an orientation. It's an orientation that presumes that the chord between the subject matter of the painter and the image, the observable reality, empirical reality, is cut. Now, what that doesn't mean is that the artist is not going to use imagery, that the image of the figure or of the human body or the landscape or the vase of flowers or the bowl of apples. It is that the relationship of that image to how we experience it visually in the world is cut, which means then the bowl of apples takes on a symbolic function. Moreover, abstraction also is cutting the anchor in the academy and the particular way of representation. So it's not just the empirical observation of optical reality. It's how the tradition of painting as a technique, as a historical traditional practice, has been taught and executed, with the predominance of a particular focus on form and composition and transition. When that chord is cut with the Impressionists, landscapes become almost abstract. Their solidity, their experience can be experienced as paint on canvas, not just as the rolling fields and the sun rising over the horizon. That is abstraction. It is cutting that chord between that chord from classical, Renaissance, Baroque representation to something else. But that doesn't mean that abstraction does away with subject matter. It shifts the subject matter. And non-objective abstraction, that's abstraction without a subject matter, doesn't develop until Kandinsky. Also, with this week in looking at Picasso and Cubism, Picasso and Cubism intersect. Picasso's artistic practice, his career, is not defined by Cubism. But Cubism plays a particular temporary role in his development from 1910 to 1915 or 1916. Picasso then begins to move. Picasso's earlier career, influenced by symbolism and Cézanne in his blue and rose periods, finds an expression on the cusp of Cubism with his very influential and crucial revolutionary painting, Demoiselle d'Avignon of 1907, which in many ways is a response to a painting of Matisse's that he saw at the collector Gertrude Stein's, I think, or even at Matisse's studio. But then Picasso will move on into a kind of a neoclassical phase in into a phase that's influenced by surrealism. But Cubism exists in the first decades of the 20th century as a modern language. It is a language that artists who are trying to learn the language of abstraction, learn the language of modern art, are going to affiliate with. And so it becomes a style, a formal technique that identifies a painter, an artist, as a modernist. But it's not identified with Picasso and Braque's laboratory collaborations. And in fact, it's Georges Braque that initiates Cubism in many ways, but Picasso and Braque are working together. Many of their paintings from 1911, 1912, you can't determine whose is whose. But both Picasso and Braque move beyond that language. But there are others, the Cubists, who will work in their wake. Juan Gris, Metzinger, even the futurist painters will work in that idiom, and it's a way to demarcate one's identity, affiliation as a modern artist. So I don't want you to equate Picasso's 70-year career and his development evolution, reduce it to the period of 5 years that he was working in the context of Cubism. Moreover, what Picasso's Demoiselle d'Avignon emphasizes, and your reading is going to focus on, the reading from your textbook is going to focus on, is the role that primitivism plays. And we've talked about this a little bit, but the emphasis of, again, moving away from Western European classical Renaissance ways of representing the world, and a gravitation towards forms like African artifacts, the African mask, African totems, Native American imagery, and also, importantly, artists whose work we would call folk artists, naive artists, artists that are not classically trained. A great example of that, an example that exerts a concrete influence on the artists like Matisse and particularly Picasso of the first decade of the 20th century, is Henri Rousseau. And in my email, I've included an attachment of one of his images that I'm sure that you'll recognize. And it's artists who are self-taught, artists who are working outside the context of this particular training that gives their work a childlike status, a directness that is emotionally powerful, that is another language, viewed within the context and conventions of the academy that preserve the classical Renaissance pictorial approach to representation. They're bad paintings. But you could say, in like a contemporary idiom, it's so bad it's good. There's a directness, there's an emotional integrity to it that Picasso was immediately attracted to. And it's that directness that attracts him and others to African imagery. And so this notion of the primitive is the non-Western, non-classical Renaissance way of approaching the world. And what is appealing is not only the technique, but what it represents. So for the African artist that makes these artifacts, they're not operating as the fine artist in the Western European tradition. They're operating within the context of religion. They're shamans. It's within the context of spirituality, of magic, of enchantment. And certainly throughout the 19th century, and many of you in your discussion prompts focus on this, the emphasis of empiricism, of naturalism, of positivism in the 19th century, not just in painting, but in science and in the humanities, just drained the modern world of the enchantment of the spiritual. That what you see is all there is. As religion and magic are seen as superstitious, are lumped up as habits of the pre-modern mind, what artists what appeal to the artists is that they're looking at art, visual imagery made by priests and shamans in a non-Western community for which this visual imagery is revealing a mystery of life. Call it whatever you want, religion, spirituality, magic, etc. It emphasizes that there is more to the world than just what you see. We're not just flesh and blood. There's something else that makes us who we are, and the world has that aura, that magic, that enchantment, the brightness of what can't be described by science, what can't be captured. And so the struggle, what the African artist or the child artist or the self-taught artist emphasize is that the representation of reality is so much more difficult and much more impossible. And so the struggle, so faced with the beauty of a sunrise or the beauty of a woman or the power and the beauty of a man or the beauty of a rose, even the most accomplished artists like Raphael and Leonardo are comparatively just like children who are drawing stick figures and shaky lines. That every human being is a child before the magnificence of nature. And in many ways, abstraction is bearing witness to that indescribable, unrepresentational aspect of nature, of reality. That to be able to experience reality, it's more than just taking a painting by Raphael or Poussin or Leonardo. You need Kandinsky's abstractions. You need Rousseau's childlike paintings. You need the African imagery. You need Jackson Pollock's drip paintings. All of those can begin to put you in the ballpark of the realm of the diversity and the magnificence of nature and our experience of the world. Also, this focus on, also I want to emphasize too, if we want another way to think about this with the impact of Rousseau and the self-taught artist or the childlike artist, think about in music, think about the voices that have a power and strength that cannot be interpreted or described as conventionally beautiful. A voice like Johnny Cash's or Tom Waits or even Bob Dylan. Artists whose voices have an honesty and directness because they're not polished. That being too polished, that being too smooth, too accomplished, glides over the roughness and the sharp edges that make our experience of the world what it is. It's the shout and the scream, as opposed to the operatic voice that at various moments gives us that sense that gives voice to our experience of the world. So that's maybe a way to think about it in terms of the visual imagery and painting. In one of your chapters in your readings, you'll be looking at collage and the importance of collage. And collage is going to further break down this notion of the classical Renaissance pictorial surface as a picture window in which the figures and the environment are operating in a unified, symphonic, compositionally coherent worldview that's held together with linear perspective. What the collage is going to emphasize is that our experience of the world is made up of bits and pieces, shards that are cut and pasted, that are not, that the unified pictorial surface is really a fiction, and what you see are the sharp edges. That a picture is made up of fragments picked up from the detritus of everyday life, from the media. And that also then changes the role of the artist. The artist then isn't the creator out of nothing in their studio, of creating this symphonic, compositionally unified whole, this worldview, this picture window on the canvas, but that what they are collectors. They're assemblers. They're making assemblages, the French term. They're putting things together. They're taking and pasting. They're cutting and pasting. They're collecting. They are deconstructing and then reconstructing. And so the role of the artist then is to take what's available. And so what you'll see with the collages, you'll see these bits and pieces of everyday life. Picasso's chair caning, or the texts from newspapers, media, visual culture. That a painting isn't pure observation or pure imagination, that it's taking, picking and choosing, picking up. You're now like a turn-of-the-century rag picker in Paris with your stick, picking up the trash and putting it in your cart that you're going to take home and you're going to make something out of. And we'll see that emphasis not just in paintings and in two-dimensional visual imagery, you'll see that in sculpture as well. So I hope these thoughts are helpful to you. I look forward to reading your responses of this past week with Matisse and then this coming week with Picasso. On Friday, I will talk to you in depth about the important role that Gertrude Stein played in the development both of Matisse and Picasso, and Matisse and Picasso's rivalry and how it got staged with Gertrude Stein, and Picasso's also his rivalry with Cézanne and the importance that Cézanne plays in the development of Matisse, but more importantly with Picasso. So you'll see another video from me on Friday. Have a great week, and again, write me if you have any questions. And oh, by the way, your midterm writing reflection is due on Sunday, the 10th. And I look forward to reading those as well. Take care.